Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metagame Book Club for Ready Player One. We are on our last week, sad panda. So, once again, we want to thank Games and Simulations Network and the Neville Trail for helping us out. And as a special warning, if you have not watched the movie, we will talk about the movie. So there will be spoilers. So if you're watching and you haven't watched the movie, stop. Watch the movie, then come back, and then go ahead and watch it and comment on Reddit, of course. So I guess a moment of silence for those that have not yet been able to watch the movie. All right, that's enough. So you've been forewarned. Moving on, the movie, To Be Disappointed or Not to Be.
Well, the movie's a different experience. So the book is wonderful. The movie's very entertaining. And my son, who's 25, just loved it. And I did too, but I had to suspend the comparisons to the book.
I had to do the same. I knew that race from the trailer was going to be something folky. I just knew it. So I was like, oh, I guess we're not going to be in some Dungeons and Dragons adventure and then have to fight the skeleton boss in jousting. I was kind of saddened by that.
Okay, I'm gonna say I love the race. I know it is not out of the book, but I absolutely love the race. I love well, first of all, I love the fact that he had to scrounge for gold coins. That is so much the grind and the scrounging that every gamer has to do. Okay, so I love that he wanted to be up front, but he couldn't because he did not prepare. He didn't have enough, if we translate it to some of the games we play, he didn't have enough mana, he didn't have enough strength, he didn't have enough food, whatever it was. So I love that he had to scrounge and that he had to loot the dead cars to go ahead. I also love the viewpoint as the car was driving along. It wasn't that big God view that the final battle was. It was like most of the time it was like I was driving that car and that my mirror neurons were going and I was actually playing a driving game. So I actually love that part. I thought it looked slick and the vehicles were able to do things that, we don't see in other kinds of movies.
Well, I want to chime in on that because I saw it in IMAX 3D on the 4th row. I thought I was going to be in the last third of they flipped the seating chart on me. So when you see that Need for Speed car race, which is what it kind of is, only with like 100 cars or something, you feel like it's penetrating your throat. And I kept making whimpering noises. My son thought I was hyperventilating or blowing an aneurysm. It was wild. It was a wild ride.
Well, exactly. I mean, what I liked was how much they use the audio, because you actually feel the explosion. They got you, the reverberations was fun. Overall, I liked the movie. I did find myself spending a little bit more time looking at the background supporting cast of characters and seeing which games were featured and which pieces were there. The only negative I had about the movie was just that I didn't necessarily like how they relegated H and Shoto and Daito to sort of tag along friends. And how they never, because in the book they actually had their skills as far as finding things and moving on, and in the movie it just seemed like they just sort of tagged along and they're like, well, I'll help you because you're my friend, I'll tell you what to do, and then they just sort of were palling around, and so I thought they could have had a bit more presence in the movie, but I think overall it's tough. It's a tough story to tell in the amount of time they did it if they tried to stick to the book. So I understand there was some creative license with that. But for me, I like the references.
Yeah, speaking of tag-along friends, how did you feel about Og Morrow's role?
Yeah, he was there? Really?
He was the invisible man. He was the invisible scene. so much for supervising or hosting or flying them to Oregon to his place or doing any of the the liquor.
He did get the extra life, and that was the funny thing is they were sitting in the movie theater, and like 3/4 of the people like gasped and like cheered when he had the extra life, and it was funny because the people I was with, they're like, oh, like, didn't they read the book?
Well,
But,
coming from a story point of view, like they had to do that because they had James Holiday and him fighting, and so he kind of got pushed out of the company in the movie version. But I liked the emphasis on James Holiday, and I know we'll go into more detail on that later. But it was I like very aesthetically pleasing, good style changes, good choices. I wanted more 80s, but I know that wasn't happening.
Yeah, and other things, they didn't really make Sorrento like that bad. I mean, yes, he wasn't the one that blew up the stacks; it was somebody else, but under his orders. But at the end, it was kind of like, well, all of a sudden now he's moved because, oh, look, he played for the love of the game, you know.
Well, now that you mention that, how did you feel about IROC? I tell you, in the book, he's kind of like the little bully person who tattles, and in the movie, he rocks, right?
Yeah. Well, he's the comic foil the whole time. I mean, that's wonderful. The whole thing. It's just great. I mean, they let him TJ just be TJ.
He's a much bigger bad guy, isn't he? Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, to know whether someone saw the movie or not, you go, you would just say, and voila means. Then I found out. That was the best delivered line in the movie.
All right, we'll go ahead and move to the next part.
Okay, that's so you can quickly see what we're going to be doing. So go ahead and click. And we might be jump around depending on what's going on. So connected learning. Okay. If you need to, go back and look up Connected Learning Alliance. Look up Connected Learning. The movie does not show it as much, but what I'm going to have to say is everything that's happening now with like the no more movement is all foreshadowed. And I was reading some things on connected learning, and they were saying about how all the references that there were to Harry Potter. I have a feeling that the movement might also have that too. So let's see. Let's talk about this. Okay, now this was a really good example again of LitRPG. Okay, the characters were role play. Okay, the characters were role playing characters and other things, and I mean. Artemis really, made that point when she was going ahead and she was saying things like, "Oh, so you can't tell me that. You don't know what I'm like. You only see what I want you to see." So they were really out. While Wade, seemed to have the crush thing going on, everyone else seemed to be really aware that they were in a game, there were rules, and that they were role playing. Okay, and as you can see here, oh, I think it jumped one. Nope. You need to come back. Okay, better. So here's the thing about it. Nope, we're still back. So thank you. So as you can see, LitRPG, just like that, it was exactly what they were showing when they were talking about levels and how people had to be level 99, and also how Wade was actually going around and had to collect the coins. So those actual game mechanics were things that you saw.
Speaking of this, if you ever go back for just a sec, my apologies. If you ever played Tomb of Horrors or read about the 1978 run of it at or 75 at Origins, the interesting thing about all that gear, because it looks good, doesn't it? All of it's cursed. So if you touch it, you die, or keep it, terrible things happen, or you lose your character forever, or whatever. So that whole module was designed as a player killer, and it was, and they played with levels 4 through 18. And now when you run the module, it comes with the characters that originally played it. And of course, it was Gary Gygax's torture of his family, right? It's how he first wrote it. And then, of course, they all played it at Origins, and everyone was grumbling. So that's what makes this so cool. He has all this wonderful stuff. It looks so great, and yet, let's face it, it's cursed.
Yeah, exactly.
So this one's mine. Someone had shared with me this yesterday, and I was like, this fit perfectly into LitRPG.
Yes.
So this is a online website called For the Worlds, and what it is that it's to help with English literacy. And to help defeat monsters, you have your own character, you collect weapons and everything, but you're typing to proceed. It's not like a keyboarding program or anything like that. It's just you typing prompts and to increase your abilities as a writer. But like it has things seeded in there. Like you can get my friend has like a copper sword, and she found this amazing like glass helm, and she's like, this is the rarest item I have.
No, that's fantastic. I'm gonna have to go. Oh my God, that's wonderful. We're gonna have to look at this more. Thank you.
Always like sharing cool stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, and just some comments from YouTube. We have people agreeing, yes, Sorrento is a minor boss level of evil. And also lots of interesting things about presentation of self in the VR space.
It was interesting that when an avatar came on or logged off, they would dissolve, right? Or they would form. It was like their pixels and their particles were all coming together. And the notion of identity and self-expression came out in both the story and the dialogue, as well as what we saw on screen.
And yes, it was totally great seeing Irok's arm cut off. And then to see the gold coming from it. So he was losing some of the loot. And then him trying to pick up some of that loot. That was fantastic too. I'm like, that's such a gamer. And again, we wanted to show you this poster. Think about this book. I mean, the book and the movie, Accept Your Reality or Fight for a Better One. It's sounding a lot like participatory culture and connected learning.
Oh, and speaking of the scene with Iraq, what I liked about it was at the end with the catalyst, and he's like going, "You're serious? You're going to use that? I've got 10 years worth of stuff in me." So it goes back to that they were very, very aware that they were in a virtual environment.
And that's so funny because he has 3 holes through him, right? If you look at his avatar, you see these 3 holes. So, so if people are shooting or whatnot, you get this feeling that instead of armoring those spots, they could just shoot right through it and not harm him, right?
Well, think about it. He's a big hulking avatar. He is actually taking away the body mass. So he is less of a target with those holes. So that's some serious function, if he's battling.
But that weapon that destroys everything reminded me so of the holy hand grenade from old Monty Python, right? And and of course, there's no save. Everyone gets killed, etc. Amazing stuff, really.
They did use the holy hand grenade when they were fighting the IO eyes, so
yeah,
don't forget about that. But
yeah.
I mean, looking at Irok, that skeleton, it was like a skeleton head for his torso. I mean, I'm sure that was a nod to probably He-Man or some other type of 80s culture right there. Wink, wink.
Nudge, nudge.
All right, next up we have Rod's review. Unfortunately, he can't make it. So he did write his review here, which is he thought that the movie was really good, but he felt like they left a lot of things out or altered a lot of things from the book. For example, when does Wade get kidnapped and taken to Artemis's house?
Well,
But it was good overall.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They did a role reversal. So Artie is the one who actually penetrates IOI and all the things. And his alter egos, right? The two aliases and setting himself up. First off, he doesn't begin in Oklahoma, right? He doesn't move to Columbus, and he doesn't upgrade his equipment. He doesn't get his original equipment from Ludus from his high school. And in the movie, his family are all in VR too, and he has taken the VR gloves from his aunt's boyfriend, and of course, which gets him punched, right? So we have a shift in both how the conflict is generated and how we feel about his family. We don't feel quite as angry at his family as we do in the book, right? Because you get the feeling he's a victim. They're taking his food vouchers. He's having to scrounge for food, right?
Well,
so you don't have that the same sense of outrage. You have some, but not quite the same.
And I think well, we came out of the movie and we're like, oh, it's been Spielberged, and the right reason we said that it was made more relatable to middle class, and to middle class white teenagers and young 20 somethings. I mean, absolutely right. His clothes didn't look great, but the description that he gave of his clothes in the book, he had one thing to wear, and I mean with the food, like you said, with the food stamps being taken away, and the aunt just not caring whatsoever, and like what was it, like 3 or 4 families living in the trailer. I mean, things weren't as rough.
Well, that's it, and of course they ignore the grim childhood bit with his mom dying at 11, and that was okay. You kind of expected them to have to cut some things just to fit it in 2 hours and 20 minutes, and secondly, to spin it up a little bit too, to keep it very upbeat. But you didn't get the sense of 15 people to a trailer, did you? I mean, you see one person per room as he goes by, and you're thinking, well, I could live with that, as opposed to 15 in my room,
Well, and that's the funny thing about it, because after he gets punched, she sends the boyfriend to his room. So, like, whereas before, like in the book, there is no room. They all live in the same room. So it's kind of funny that you see that. But it was I did like the intro where they went down the stacks and you saw the different people in the background doing various different things with their VR headsets on. I thought that was actually kind of really cool. You had everything from people playing action games to people dancing to people surfing waves and doing different things like that. And you even saw a couple of little kids were doing it as well. And then, of course, the end, whenever everyone's watching the live stream of the final fight, as they're driving through the streets or looking around, and everyone has their headsets on, and they're all like, what could they possibly be watching? And that's the reason. That's how they figure out that it's being live broadcast. So it's kind of interesting. Everyone was sort of, got involved. And, of course, the final battle scene where they showed the real life version, and everyone's doing their moves out in the real world, being able to notice no one ran into anybody in the real world either. So everyone was precisely, spread apart. I think like it was hilarious to see like the Halo guys, in real life running together with their hands up.
That was so wild. And you're right about that sense of community. His trailer park doesn't seem to be quite as despairing, even though it's poor and stacked up. It reminded me of the last Starfighter film, in the sense of a trailer park where people try to work together, even though they're
help each other.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think, Blue?
I mean, looking at the final scene was kind of like a bit jarring, because you have like multiple locations going on here of the virtual world, then you have Artemis in IO, and then them in a car. Like the whole third act was being taken place in this back of this van. So I was like, I don't know how he's functioning very well doing the VR stuff if he keeps moving around. And we got that with the trying to fit that key in. And I was like, God, it can't be that difficult, can it? Like I remember looking at some of the beginning things of virtual reality and like the zombie shooter games, and they were like having the hardest time trying to reload ammo because they just couldn't do it.
Well, that's the thing about it. I mean, the other people were. What surprised me there was that the other people were just watching him get flung around instead of bracing him. That part really surprised me, because if they played together virtually, like, okay, here's the gamer in me. If they played with each other, if they played virtually as a dungeon group, which it looked like they did and did things similar to raids, they would know that there's positionality to it. And they didn't stack around him. And if they'd stack, they could have stabilized him. So all I could think of when I was saying that, I was like, wait is a stack point. Wait is a stack point. Why are you not stacking on him? And then they were watching him bounce around. It's like, well, maybe if you guys.
That's interesting, that lack of an anchor in the physical world, so that his virtual response could be more appropriate. That's a really good point there.
But in the immortal worlds of show, what do you want me to do? Post a sign that says I'm 11 years old?
Well,
Did you know
11-year-olds know how to stack and they know how to kite, okay?
Especially show.
Yeah, 11-year-old gamers know how to stack, okay? That's all I have to say.
What struck me about these next two slides, they're both storyboard that, and they're by students. They are online. I've provided the link. And what I find interesting about it is their perspective on the book and thinking about how they might see the movie and think about the differences, what they thought was important. You'll notice in both of these, they're featuring the high school and him discovering what Ludus means, and the fact that that planet, has the key, or has the steps to the key. And so I thought that was very interesting. And then, of course, this one goes all the way up to the joust, which, of course, I think there was a little sticker or poster for it, wasn't there, Blue, in the movie, but not the game.
Yeah, there was.
Then in the next scene, you'll see another take. It goes into a little bit more detail, because here we start thinking about when the players come together, right? In the upper right, you'll see that Wade rents an apartment in Columbus, Ohio. Well, we don't see that transition, and he doesn't have that good life in the movie. Or if he did, I missed it, right? And he also, the Max Headroom and his digital assistant, I know he has his car and Kit added to it, but we really don't see an emphasis on that as we're watching the movie. And then, of course, there's Ogmoro in the lower left, hiding in the basement. And of course, he knocks over the books, and that's when they think, what was that, right? In a virtual world, no less. And then, of course, when he first meets H, I thought that was very cool in the movie. Although it all seemed to happen earlier. He met Artemis quite a bit earlier, didn't he?
Not face to face. Not till like the very end when he got to Ogden's. He only sent emails and messages.
No, I'm talking about the movie. In the movie, he meets her a lot earlier, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Dido. And then, of course, which I don't think he ever met face to face in the book. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you'll notice where they end the story, and they've kind of twisted it around because he doesn't say the "I love you" until the very end. So I thought that was interesting.
So we're back with 80s and pop culture. As you could hear from my earlier beginning review, there was a lack of 80s. There was sprinkled in there, but it wasn't as superfluous as in the novel. But I will say that any like major thing that happened, an 80s thing was involved. So at least I was okay with that. So I really wanted to look at like the keys and the gates, because like I said, any major thing that happened to get those keys was involved with something 80s. So at least they kept that. But as true to form with the book, pretty much all of it was a no until maybe the last key, I could say. But even that's kind of still on rough, shaky ground. So on to the next slide. So I want to take a look at this copper key. I predicted it. I couldn't be more right that the race had to do with a key. I didn't. It was the first key that they had to get. It was the impossible race, and you had to get through all these crazy 80 challenges to get there. I was hoping for some Ghostbusters stuff, but that wasn't happening. But that's okay. We got King Kong. We had buildings falling down like craziness. Helicopters. Just and T-Rex is in there from Jurassic Park. Not exactly 80s. I mean early 90s, let's be real. But it was a lot of fun stuff going on there. I mean, lots of fun little hidden Easter eggs. You got some like Street Fighter people racing in cars, and then you had Wade in his DeLorean. So it was kind of curious. Like he does have that, but he did not have that initially. He was a very poor default avatar, so he didn't have a lot of money to buy himself a car. So they kept his kind of poor status where he had to like scrounge around and get gold just to fill up his gas tank to keep on going in this race.
That's right. You saw a lot of Warner Brothers characters, and of course, Ghostbusters. The Sony owns the rights to them. So I did a little reading on why certain things weren't in there, and it was, of course, due to digital rights.
Oh, it's always his intellectual property.
But Laura Croft was in there driving, and quite a few, quite a few of the Warner properties.
Whatever they could sneak in. And then the second key, I know I had things leading up to the second key, and then what would happen was we finally were put into a movie. Granted, it wasn't like we were doing a scripting, we weren't acting. Like for key one, we had to go through war games. So this one we were going through The Shining. But it wasn't exactly what we thought it was, like in the book where it's like you play a character. You are just set in this world that revolves around the movie. So that was kind of cool. And it was a nice focus on Holiday's relationships. And we could see like the comparisons between Parzival/Wade to Holiday and how close they were in like who they were, like their personalities, and like those types of things. I thought that was very interesting. And I think I would probably be in H's position where I'd be screaming at everything.
Oh yeah. See, we've toured the Stanley Hotel where Stephen King got the inspiration for the movie, right? And in fact, I took my son through there, and then we're watching this movie, and he's going, "Oh, I know what's behind that room." But you're right. The flick sinks for War Games and the other, really not there. And of course, that would have been hard to bring to screen and have it to be. Other than little snippets, right? So we could understand why that had to be changed.
Very true. And I think the other component of that is that they were focusing more on Holiday's background. And I think like with Ernest Cline, that was definitely one of his plot holes. Like you did not get a lot of him. You got a part of him, but not all of it. And you could see that each key and gate was a result of Holiday's past, whether it was a success or a failure, which he mostly thought he was being a failure at, and he wasn't being very successful, whether that was with Oasis and how it evolved, or with relationships with Kira. So you could see the dissonance between those two.
Right. Speaking of keys and gates, I was asking people who had seen it who hadn't read the book, and they're like, "What do you mean by gates?" There was just keys. There were 3 of them, and they just give them to us. And I was like, "Not in the book."
Yes, within the movie, all 3 of the keys and the gates, they were just really like right next to each other. It wasn't like an adventure to get through the gate. Like the second gate, you had to battle through Black Tiger and beat that to win, just to get your clue to the next one. So there wasn't really a lot of clue solving as much. I mean, like it was more a very actiony. We were focusing on the characters and the dystopic future and the rebel against the man with Iowa Eye. I mean, we got more of a backstory with Artemis, her parents, and why she is in the resistance, and why is Parsifal not a part of it. even though I don't feel like initially Paulsville was like, I just want it for fame and glory. I'm like, that's not who he was either. So they did a little altering, or should I say cutting, for Paulsville in order to make his character arc flow better with the story. And then everybody coming together to get to the fortress, the sphere of, I totally can't even pronounce that name to save my life. That was
What's
the
that?
burial. For the sphere of Inzurakima or whatever.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, you know, I in the book, I didn't really focus on a rebellion per se. I thought of the clans as standing out against IOI, and I thought of the Gunters, you know, standing up against IOI, but I didn't think of them as physically getting together, having a little clubhouse or having a having a warehouse or facility, you know, and then having this organized kind of movement. In fact, I thought everyone's identities were fairly private, and that was one of the goals.
Oh yes, definitely. I think it was kind of like a hodgepodge of people working together at the end. Like, but we were kind of missing that clan element. You got some of it. You had like the Halo group people, and they were acting as a squad, shooting out people, and then it was just really chaotic, a good chaotic. But like I said, you gotta like. Once I buy this movie, I'm just gonna be freeze framing it just to see how many people I can see. But I loved the emphasis at the end for him, where he's really talking about where the Easter egg came from and talking about Warren Robinette and adventure. And that was the reason why IOI couldn't really truly win Holiday's game, was because it was not about winning. It was about finding out who was the person that created, finding out who he was, and they did that with Holiday, and I really liked how they did that, and his so to the next slide, because it's really talking about who he is. Looking at James Holiday, they did parts of his opening video of him dying and presenting to everybody what's going on. They didn't do the whole thing like they did in the book. But the pieces that they did look at, I was like him in his coffin, then him in his room. Like they were looking at pieces of him, and then as they progress, Percival looking at Anorak's archives, looking at all of his memories. Like think about that. I think they said that the Anorak archives were a collection of everything from security cameras to phone things to whatever they could. Like every bit of his life was recorded. And I had me thinking about our lives. Like how much of our lives are recorded? Like could we do that? Could we reconstruct every memory we had based on like things where those cameras are? Like it was just a really kind of like freaky moment for me thinking about them. Like, oh god, we are, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of hours of, if not millions, of this guy's personal life, like insignificant moments of him in a coffee shop with his friend or them talking. Like how many times they had to watch to do that over with. Like they talked about his journal entries and everything, but the archives is where it became alive. It was visualized. And I thought that was very intense.
Well, if we think of a culture shift, because this movie occurs in 2045, and if we think of him over a 60-year period, um, with the amount of video presence and reality TV we have today, imagine that in the future, projected 20, 30 years from now, we are a very photographed generation right now, even as we drive through town, the things that we do. And imagine a day when we're always being photographed in some fashion or another. So it's hard to find any downtime. I know that sounds terribly intrusive, but it sounds like in that day and age, people really don't have privacy.
Well, exactly. And there's always that continuous monitoring that was there. So you had, whether it was CTV cameras, traffic cameras, ATM cameras, there's definitely the idea that everything there was being recorded. And the heavy use of drones. That's one of the things I'll talk about in the technology section is there are drones everywhere. Like even they had them in world as well as they were using drones there out on the streets as well. So definitely was very heavily documented or recorded society at that point in time. And that was a nice segue into technology, fact or fiction. Didn't intend it, but All right, so first off, we'll go ahead and we'll get started with, we saw a lot of the technology we already talked about. So we talked about the haptic suits, we talked about the omnidirectional treadmill, we saw that the haptic gloves. So there's lots of different things that we had already talked about previously that we won't go over, but they specifically called it a omnidirectional treadmill whenever he was playing around, which is nice that Wade was so well off that he was able to afford that at the beginning of the movie. So next up, drones. So we had lots of drones. IOI had drones. They were the ones who mostly used it, flying around. There's a lot of action sequence that were going on in there that had the drones and played a specific role. They even used drones. This is a picture of the drone that they used to film the postal van fight. That was there. So this is the postal van, and then this is a little camera drone that they're flying around taking pictures of the actual van they actually had on set. And then I read this article a couple days after the movie came out. Ready Player One drone spitting postal truck might be ready soon. So this is the company out there called Workhorse, and one of the things they were showing was this is a screenshot from a video where they had them showing how the guy went ahead and released the drone in a package. Put a package in the drone for the drone to pick up, released the drone, and then he went and hand delivered a package while the drone flew ahead of him and delivered the package at the next house up. And then he drove past the drone to the next house and he delivered it, and the drone was able to fly back to the van and go back inside. So prototype still, they're still playing around with it. But they are looking at those disbursements. So for me, for drones, I'm going to say factish. And while not as widespread or sophisticated as the movie, they are getting there pretty fast. It's amazing to see how much they're changing and how much and how robust the different drones are getting in just a short amount of time. So you're seeing that idea. I mean, Amazon has already, for over a year now, been testing drones for delivery.
Speaking of his setup, his rig, remember when he first goes into his lair, his hideaway, he starts running on the treadmill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had flashbacks back to how he had to power his gear, right? Because he didn't have power in his hideaway. And of course, they didn't emphasize that in the movie, but my son was asking me, what is he doing? Why is he just running? And I'm like, he needs power, baby.
Well, the funny thing is that actually in the movie, they actually had the bike. They actually had the picture. The bike was in the background. So, but he never had to use it to get his battery because, in this wonderful life he was in, everything was always charged. So I think he hired somebody to come pedal.
I thought his first run was charging it. I didn't realize that wasn't charging it.
I thought
to me, his first run, I picked it up as either calibrating or him loosening himself up so that way he could go ahead and like stretching and doing some calisthenics. But who knows? So we're going to jump to H's mobile haptic rig. So Blue talked to us a little bit about this before. So think about this. In the back of a van, 5 personal rigs, the Wi-Fi cable harnesses, power supply, omnidirectional treadmills, and more.
Well, I don't think that one had the omnidirectional treadmill. I think they just had the cable system going for them.
Well, actually, if you looked at the screen, they actually showed treadmills underneath them. Well, there are smaller ones than actually no. Even Wade's was pretty small, so it was a little probably like a 2x2 square underneath them. And so here you see the cable harnesses on Daito back. This is whenever Wade's getting ready to do his stirring speech to call everyone to take on Castle Anarach and IOI. A little bit closer view of it. So it turns out the cabling's actually already here. So cabling, it's just stage rigging basically. The middle picture there is actually a stage rigging vest. You can see multi-point harness where you can put the harnesses any different way you want to have them. That's setting up. When it comes to the Wi-Fi in the vehicle, that's also here. There's Wi-Fi wireless routers and modems that you can actually put in your car to make your car wired, or you can just buy a wired car. But if you wanted, for those homemakers out there, there's the AutoNet wireless modem and wireless router. And also, of course, you can tie it to your smartphone, but I don't know that about the connection speed. Depends on how much data you have. And so for me, I looked at H's mobile haptics rig, and I felt it was factish. I mean, quite honestly, the equipment is available. The biggest thing that makes it more fictiony is the fact that he had a consistent connection despite driving. And going past multiple cell towers and not having any issues with losing connection or losing feed. Speed, obviously, if you're doing any sort of PvP, they weren't really dealing with a whole lot of speed issues or latency issues. And of course, then the other question is powering all the good stuff that's going on. I mean, I don't know how much power or voltage is needed for 5 people to be online in a virtual world with that much action and that much graphics being done and sucking down energy to do that. And then also be able to get out of a parked area and start driving around on the road.
Oh no! Look at I'm estimating like 1,000 people on this one planet in this one instance of Planet Doom and at Tower of Anarok. I mean, goddamn! Like, whoa, sorry. Kaguri's game servers must be burning alive. I mean, I'm surprised they survived.
Exactly, just the heat generated, I think, would be another issue to deal with doing all of that. And I didn't really notice any solar panels on the van either. So who knows about that? It looks like Lear posted that Shemai is mentioning in the chat that there was a Black Mirror episode called Be Right Back, where a simulation of a dead husband was created by consolidating all of his pictures and digital activity and traces. And that's the thing, is it's interesting because you do have the 360 photos now, where you can actually pull together the actual, various photos. You have the algorithms and the software that'll pull together a 360 view of a location based on the available images from a variety of different services.
And Michio Kaku's Next World also featured that, where you had the chance, you could bring someone back to life as like a digital representation, like their voice patterns, what they looked like, what they sounded like, memories and stuff would be stored in this like virtual hologram. So we might be heading in that direction the next 30 years.
And then next up, we have Sorrento Sweet Pod. So it's basically the Jaguar of optic rigs. So he's got the full leather seating. He's got the magic 8 balls with the handprints on them. This is a screen grab from someone already pulled the screen grab down from a trailer, and you can see here is Artemis sitting inside Sorrento's pod, and also, of course, we saw Sorrento was guilty of leaving his password. Like, not even hiding. There wasn't even a keyboard for him to hide it under. He just stuck it there.
Well, you know why? In the movie, they emphasize the fact that he used to get coffee for Halliday, and he'd try to engage Halliday, and he'd say, "Man, I just want an espresso, or a cappuccino, or
that's a good latte."
Yeah, latte. There we go. And and of course, so here he is. He leaves his password right there on a sticky on the arm of his and everyone sees it. It's like
Well, and that's the thing about it is it's like once again, here's cybersecurity issues. Don't leave your password out, especially whenever you're trying to be a level 2 evil villain. You don't want to leave your password out sitting there on your rig where anyone can see it, especially when you're projecting your enemy as a holographic image into your actual office. So
that was some Inception stuff right there.
Yeah, exactly. And that was pretty good. I mean, obviously Wade had must have had like a photographic memory to recreate that entire office that he spent maybe 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, to remember every single little detail that it would fool Sorrento to think that he had unplugged. But I loved the thing where they had him take off his visors and sort of peek around the end of the pod. To see if anyone actually was there. So we've talked about these. Some of these are pictures you've seen as far as little pods that are there. You can see most of them are still in prototype mode or using a gaming chair. We've seen this rig here, which isn't as fully enclosed, did not have the projections onto the actual inside glass. Instead, they're using a rig that holds 3 monitors. So for now, it's fiction. But who knows? Maybe we'll have a high-end VR pod coming out soon.
Well, if you did an arcade variety type, like a cockpit, they do exist, but not quite the same as his. That's right.
Exactly. So we're getting there. Yeah, like I said, whenever they get like some luxury automotive maker decides to make their hand-stitched leather seating gamer chair, then we'll start seeing that. Loyalty centers. So what's interesting with the loyalty centers, it reminded me that they just basically took a sound booth, a portable sound booth, and they just painted it white. But you can see these booths are out there. The one on the left is a study solution for students. That you can go into your little pod and you can isolate yourself, and you have room for your laptop. You got a little stool there, and you can set that up. It takes a lot less space. The one on the right is the sound booth. So for now, we're not really big on indentured servitude. There is no debtor's prison. So it is fiction.
Well, that's what's interesting about that. And of course, from YouTube, some of the commentary from Shomai includes things like the notion of identity and engagement between the emotional engagement. The loyalty center sounds like such a positive term for work off your debt, whereas you never work off your debt, right? You're always in debt.
Exactly.
And of course, you have this grim little space you work in. And when he actually in is it level 2 or level 3? When he goes underground and gets arrested, 3. Yeah, early in level 3, he it's grim. There he can't do anything. He can't make any decision for himself. For eating and sleep and this and that and the other, until he circumvents their security system. But so to imagine it. Those little cubes, they look really confined as far as space, but they don't give the same sense of grimness, right?
They don't. I mean, it is cubicle. It is very cube farm worthy and the office worthy, because it definitely was not a fun place to be there, being on your little climate control pod. But for me, it was just interesting how easy it was to subvert. That all you had to do is have the wherewithal to lift your hands up over your head. And,
yeah, I know.
And then pop the little ledge and flip the switch, and all of a sudden you're allowed to go, and your anklet fell off.
I like that. I like it.
Blue, I think you were going to say something.
Yes. I just know, like, I know it didn't seem very grim, but I gotta tell you, that's a claustrophobia Poston's worst nightmare.
But see, tiny homes are real popular right now. So that one on the left, even though the stool looked uncomfortable, looked cute from a trendy, modern kind of feel. But you wouldn't want to spend 8 hours in there, right?
Well, exactly. You wouldn't. And they did have windows so people could look in, which was also interesting. That it was funny because whenever she snuck out, like, I'm like thinking to myself, really, their state of the art facility doesn't have the security, the security that was available in 1980s to actually track people on a camera. You could pull up video footage and follow them, even though you're monitoring everything that everyone else is doing. So there's some suspension of disbelief there. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So the next book club will be on Learning Transported, Augmented Virtual and Mixed Realities for All Classrooms.
Ooh,
Any parting thoughts or words of wisdom?
We had some commentaries from YouTube that we didn't finish. Like the notion of Artemis playing Z in order to win the contest was much more convincing in the book, is one of the comments. And then, of course, the relationship dynamic, how it changed between the movie and the book. And then what did you guys think about the end of the movie? See, I liked the book where it leaves it kind of to our imagination as to what he decides to do. He goes out into the sunshine. Whereas in the movie, I thought it was a little more realistic to say, 2 days a week, everything shuts down. What if those were your 2 days off? That would be terrible. What do you think?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that immediately sprung to mind for me is that when he was like, "Well, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're shutting it down," and I was like, going, "Okay, well, patch day," and then and then the other piece to me was like going like, "Well, wait a minute. If people are using the virtual world to be their economic engine, and you have people who are that's how they're surviving day to day, is skimming coins." Having everything shut down for that means they don't have food.
What happens to class too? If you go to school in the virtual world and you're used to certain days to go, all of a sudden he just arbitrarily shuts it down. So it seemed like, Hollywood used to have these moral filters they used to add to films. You could always tell who was going to die based on their actions early in the story, right? So you got the same sense at the end that shutting it down for 2 days is a good thing. And while we believe that stepping away from technology for periods of time is a good thing, should the system choose when this happens for you?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's interesting because also, I mean, it's intriguing because it is definitely something that today's platform companies would never do. One day, yes, for maintenance and updates, but 2 days a week of not providing a platform, not providing the platform that so many people in the world, depended upon, based on the storyline and everything like that, both from the book and from the movie. If there's such a heavy reliance on that one platform, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I understand I understand the reason why they did it. I understand, oh yes, well, that's a noble good, that you shouldn't be stuck in a virtual world, you should live your real life. But part of me is like going like, well, if you make all your money out of the virtual world, and that's really where you're just scraping by, then I mean, they did mention that they got rid of all the loyalty centers, so that was good.
Yeah, the negative stuff I could understand getting rid of. It's the positive stuff. Imagine if we were living in a cramped dystopian kind of lifestyle and all of a sudden we had nothing to do for 2 days. Do you think crime would go up? I mean,
yeah, well, exactly.
You have enough virtual crime, right?
Well, the other thing is if Wade was so poor that he was doing all this stuff, wow, did he lose touch really quickly? Because he was living the lifestyle of somebody who had to had to make any money they got out of the it looks like Shemai saying that a strange message, given this driving theme, the story of the Oasis was such an important institution, and to say now you've cut off people's livelihoods. Exactly, and that was the thing that was really, to me, was sort of shocking at the end. Was just sort of like that made me just sort of stop and do the little dog thing where you cock your head to one side and you're like, "Whir?" Because it was like, wait a minute, okay, it's nice that you're a multi-trillionaire, but what about the little people, Wade? You were one of them. Now all of a sudden you're like, hey, guess what, guys? You guys have no source of money for 2 days out of the week. So sorry. You have to hustle extra hard on the other 5 days.
And Chomai adds smells of digital dualism, this notion of precluded living a real life in a digital space. So what's interesting? When we think of games and we think of virtual worlds, we think of your ideal self, your empowerment, your ability to teleport to places and to be with people all over the world that you couldn't do normally, in your little community, and to have all of those things cut out, all the good things. And I love the fact that people could work in these spaces too.
Mm-hmm.
I would love teaching in a kind of high school like they had in Ludus. I would probably change things a little bit. We wouldn't all be confined to chairs, but I would love the virtual field trips.
Well, exactly. There's lots of things to level. There's lots of things to take away from it. It would be fun. once this technology does become as ubiquitous, that's again if VR survives the trough of disillusionment. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with VR as we move forward. It looks like yes. Yeah, we have another comment from YouTube. Wade has become the new corporate man. Yes, he has, and he made his 4 friends also a part of corporate man. But hey, it worked out well because you have Wade that does all the narrative stuff with all the background. You have Wade and Artemis doing the narrative research for the company and being in charge of it, and then you have H handling the PvP system as well as the crafting system. And you also have Dato and Shoto doing the fight mechanics and looking at the fight animations as well as the different PvP system. Because that's the thing about it is they really didn't go much into Shoto and Daito. Other than that, they're really good killers on Planet Doom. And of course, my favorite one was whenever they threw the Chucky bomb on people. And just watching the swaths of Sixers get redded out in different patterns all over the floors. That was probably the most fun.
There was a comment about that because someone asked me, why were all the Halliday scholars cheering at the end when Wade was successful? And I said, because they're probably indentured and oppressed into those positions. And frankly, most of us want to be liberated, right?
Well, and it's done. They're like, it's done. I don't have to do this anymore. I can go do something else.
That's right.
But you're absolutely right because that's one of the Wade's biggest concerns was in the book was them finding out he had holiday knowledge and having become an oolologist. So it was definitely something that's there.
And what did you think about the final scene where not only does he close it down for 2 days, but he gets the girl, he has her in his lap, and he gives her a big kiss? You're thinking the high schooler who's now a graduate, right? Recent graduate, now has the girl. So he, he needs 2 days off.
Yeah, exactly. You need 2 days free of meetings. So you're going to shut everything down.
Did you see the comment about Oasis wasn't democratized or made egalitarian? There's some interesting commentaries that are going to come out of this movie. They're going to make us think about our future. And that's the delightful thing about books, movies, and our imagination is where it takes us from here.
Mm-hmm. Guess we'll have to wait for Ready Player One, the sequel.
Well, I mean, Ernest Cline is working on Ready Player One too, so
yeah,
it's not too far off for a stretch of the imagination. It's happening. Well, I don't know if he's going to make another movie, but I know he's making another book, and he's currently writing it. But I think I wanted to go back on Hollywood morality. Someone mentioned that. I was like, it really looked at me for like the role reversal. They victimized Artemis because she had debt, and then they put her into the loyalty center. Whereas Wade's approach in the book was, I'm going to infiltrate and like dismantle it entirely. So I mean, I think Hollywood censorship and filtering of it was like, we don't want a Mr. Robot on our hands going on. This is
exactly. We don't want to encourage hackers.
Oh, right. I gotta say that was pretty smart to just infiltrate a company like that. So it wasn't something you want to go to the masses and be like, get hacking codes, find out stuff,
Well, speaking of which, we really didn't see all his passwords and the too many sneakers and the reindeer flotilla.
Or his base, or his fortified base.
Or the video channels either.
Yeah, exactly. The streaming channels. But I will say the Xenomorph thing was actually hilarious. And having to go ahead and you need to wear a disguise. That was a very funny scene. All right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Oh, go ahead, Blue.
I think also the time thing too. Like they had him looking at clues and stuff. Like he was stuck on gate 2 for quite some time, and they're like, "Oh, we got this in a couple of days. We're all good to go."
Exactly. They like skip to the end. All right. So upcoming. So in Second Life, we still have the Ready Player One space available until April 10th. So feel free to visit if you have not. If you visited, thank you very much. We also have on April 18th, we have the Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration. So feel free to sign up for that. It's actually in Second Life, so you can get your Second Life fix again. And you may recognize somebody from this book club keynoting here. So we'll leave that a trivia, and all our Gunters out there can figure out who it is. Next up, we have Second Life's Relay for Life event on April 19th to 21st, and I believe we have someone who's involved in that.
Yes, I'm actually in both of those because after Kay's keynote, I'll be on for the Vicara as well. And yes, the Fantasy Fair and Lit Fest. So for those of you who like to write, they will publish your work. You write, you tour a region in the fair, then you write. They do a little writing sprint, and then based on your results of your writing sprint, they will publish that.
Oh, we are so doing that. We're just adding that to Games and Sims. Okay,
I love it. I've done it for the last few years. I'll be speaking on it for the Nonprofit Commons the Friday of that week, probably the 20th.
Okay, yeah. Let us know the information. We will put that out also.
It is lots of fun. Last year was my first year doing LitFest. It was great.
Okay, we're doing it this year. Okay. And now coming up, our next thing. Okay, so okay, we skipped over it, but Sherry on the 22nd is going to be doing games and ethics with us.
Woohoo!
She's awesome.
I love that. She does such an amazing job.
And the game we're going to be focusing on is The Vanishing of Ethan Carter from 2014.
And just to end it up, we'll just tell you about our other ISTE things coming up, because we will be in Chicago for the ISTE conference, and we are just doing Ready Player One all over the place. So that our playground will be Ready Player One, and I will tell you, we will have at least 3 tables of nothing but VR. Okay, and cool VR. I don't have the announcement yet. And then, of course, we will be doing games night. And games night is 5:30 to 7:30. That will be on the Monday night, and we'll have a bunch of games, including 2 more VR demos, because we couldn't not do it. So that's all we have. Thank you guys so much for coming to our Ready Player One book club. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it. So that's going to be it. Bye, everybody.